Hello and welcome back to another exciting day of the Dating After Divorce for Women, igniting your post divorce glow up, boosting confidence, and releasing fears to attract a long term, committed, and secure relationship interview series. For those that are just joining for the first time, you're in the right place. This series is your Give It To Me Straight resource for practical and actionable advice to help you move one step closer to attracting a long term, committed, and secure relationship you deserve. I am your host, Stefanie Flygare, and today we have Veronica Monet. Veronica is on a mission to empower and elevate others in their most intimate relationships, including connection to self. She helps people from all walks of life to heal shame and sexual trauma so they can rebirth their emotional and sexual reality to be an authentic expression of their deepest truths. She brings inspiration and insight from her own journey to guide others through this process of transformation. Veronica is here to provide you with the Give It To Me Straight goods to help you move one step closer to attracting a long term, committed, and secure relationship. As we explore the topic, flipping the script, how to be totally confident after years of gaslighting. Ooh. So, Veronica, thank you so much for being here with us today. And before we jump right in and dive right into this juicy topic
Yeah.
that I'm so eager to talk about, could you kick things off by sharing a little bit about yourself or your journey and what brought you here today or where you are today?
Yeah. Stephanie, thank you. First of all, just thank you for putting on this event. I think it's
Thank
really
you.
important. And thank you for including my voice in it and just being who you are. It's really a pleasure to get to
Thank
dialogue with you and
you.
connect with you.
Thank you.
I came from a very unique childhood that I'm actually writing about in my second book, which is a prescriptive memoir. And I was born into a family that had incest on both sides.
Mm,
So, lots of trauma.
yeah.
And my father and mother are both really narcissistic people
Yeah.
who gaslit me all the time. So I grew up being gaslit. And it was really hard when you're a child and your parents are not putting your well-being at the center, but rather look, kind of using you to bolster their own, lack of self-esteem. Um, Narcissists love to be love bombed. They need constant supply. And if you're the child of a narcissist or two narcissists, then you learn that your survival really depends on supplying them with lots of praise,
Yeah.
or attention. So I left that abusive home, went to college, and promptly turned to drugs and alcohol
Yeah.
and got into a lot of trouble and had a very painful romantic relationship of my own, which involved domestic violence. And it was very difficult for me to extricate myself from that situation. Um,
Oh,
I have paid my dues and went on to get married at some point after I got into recovery, after I got into therapy, and
yeah.
had maybe less life threatening challenges. And
Right.
eventually, after 14 years, my husband relapsed around drugs and alcohol, and I had been sober a long time. At this point now, I have had continuous sobriety for 39 years. So that's real important to me. And I filed for divorce.
Mm,
Um, he was less narcissistic than my parents, but fairly narcissistic person too. So it's been quite a journey around that. And I coach people around the things that I have healed myself. So I coach people as a rape survivor, an incest survivor, a domestic violence survivor, and also somebody who's had drug and alcohol issues and my own anger management issues. So I'm an anger management coach. I'm a certified sexologist, and I bring that to people through what I call the shame-free zone. Just an opportunity to really talk about things that people have a hard time talking about
Yes.
without there being the shame burden around that. So I model that, I live that, I coach that. I think it's my spiritual path.
Wow. Thank you so much, Veronica, for sharing just a little bit of
Yeah.
this very intense and challenging and a lot of lows and a few highs there, and just being vulnerable and open to share that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
like
And let's be clear, there's actually been quite a few highs. Not drug
very
induced, not drug induced. I got sober in 1985 and my life turned into magic. But
yes.
I've been on a spiritual path ever since then. So I'm not living this life just through self-will. I've
Right.
prayer, meditation, and looking for guidance. So
Yes.
I've actually been very blessed with um, got my first book 20 years ago, 17 years in major media, everything from CNN to Fox News, just um, helped create an award-winning documentary
Yes.
called Love Over Money. So the first 18 years of my life were hell. The next 5 years were self-induced blackout.
Yeah.
And the last 39 years have been incredibly magical. And I can say that in the face of having gone through a divorce,
Wow.
which is why I think I want to lend my voice to this topic because it's divorce is
Yes.
often a time of new beginnings. Um, and it doesn't have to be one that, um, you know, regrets the past.
Yeah.
You can be really grateful for what we had
Yes.
and then move on.
Very true. I wanted to see like that is all there is. But I resonate so much with this. And
Yeah.
while you were speaking and while you were talking about this, um, I know that, I'm not gonna try and go down this same rabbit hole, but I too myself resonate with that story because I know the challenges of sobriety. I myself have also had went through that deep dark place,
Mm,
and I kept myself there. So I
mm,
do know the challenges of
yeah.
coming out and feeling at times you have to claw your way out, and it is beautiful now to come in and to be like, you know what? I know why I went through that.
Yeah.
I know why I'm meant to be here, and I know why and who I'm
Yeah.
supposed to serve. So thank you for sharing that, because look at where
Yeah.
you're at right now. You are
Yeah.
amazing, and look
Yeah.
at all that you have done. But
Yeah.
that just kind of also hearing that story, and you mentioned, gaslighting and not having just one narcissistic, parent, but having two.
Yeah.
And yet that was what you're attracting in relationships. So you you experience, what this entails.
Yeah.
So I have a question to like now easing into it now. There's a lot of talk about gaslighting, and whether it be like social media or you hear it through friends or loved ones and they talk about it, but there's also some confusion about what it is. Can
Yeah.
you clarify this topic for us?
I would love to. So there are a lot of different ways to not be honest.
Mm,
And one of the ways that all of us engage in dishonesty is by not telling ourselves the truth. My spiritual practice in getting clean and sober was based on rigorous honesty. But that rigorous honesty didn't mean I had to go blast everything about my personal life to everyone.
Right.
It meant that I needed to get honest with myself and my higher power and at least one other person. And that's very difficult for a lot of people because there's a lot of stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
So the thing to know about somebody who's gaslighting you, I would want to back up and say, just you can tell somebody's being dishonest with you. Doesn't necessarily mean they're gaslighting. So they might actually be intentionally lying to you and manipulating you to try to gain power in the connection, maybe even to try to make sure that they get their needs met. And so that a lot of times it's based on fear. If I tell you the truth, maybe you'll leave me or abandon me or judge me. So I won't. Almost all of us can relate to that, the fear of being found out.
Right.
And so we can have some compassion for that. But the thing is that our intimate relationships are based on contracts. And those contracts need to be abided by. Otherwise, they're a huge violation. And I would say when you're lying to your partner around things like sex and money, you're committing an act of theft because your partner has agreed to be intimate with you and share those kind of intimate parts of themselves, whether it's their finances or their body, with the understanding that they're safe.
Yeah.
And if you are not keeping those agreements, whatever they are, and I work with poly couples, so I'm not talking about monogamy and fidelity. I'm talking about honesty. Whatever the arrangement is, whatever the agreements are, they need to be kept. And if they're not kept, then the contract has been broken and a theft has occurred, and you have every right to feel hurt. But also a need to establish some type of a boundary. So sometimes that arises because of greed, lust, people's wanting to they want to have everything. They want to have your love, your trust, your undying loyalty, and at the same time go get what they want from somebody else in some other way. But sometimes people are also traumatized. And you might have a partner who engages in pathological lying. Now, that's a term that a lot of us have thrown around. But the thing about pathological lying is that usually the pathological liar actually believes their lies. So it's going to be really difficult to get the truth from that person because they are damaged. And they would need to get into therapy to explore this pattern where they actually reinvent the truth and believe the new story. There's also a condition called dissociative amnesia. And this is an accelerated or amplified version of trauma where somebody has a trigger in a particular circumstance, and what they do and say things they cannot remember. Or maybe things have been done to them that they can't remember. And that's an actual diagnosis. Definitely, you could start to kind of tell if your partner isn't tracking certain blow ups, like, they lose their cool, they do something, and they're like, I never did that. Now, that's where you've got the choice point. Is this person suffering from trauma and really doesn't remember, or are they gaslighting me? Right. And it's not always an easy determination. Right. And I have been in a relationship with people who did both. I think my father did both. But I think my father mostly did dissociative amnesia because he really thought he was being honest. He had a huge investment in honesty, but he wasn't able to admit to the crimes that he was committing against my sister and I.
Right.
So that's one thing. usually the dissociative amnesia, you kind of get the sense you're talking to two different people at two different times. With the gaslighter, it feels like there is always an agenda, and the agenda is to make sure that they are never to blame. This is why gaslighting is so often associated with narcissism. And the thing to know about narcissism is it's also a trauma response, usually. I'm not saying that there aren't some narcissistic people who take great pride in being narcissistic and totally about self interest. They do exist, and they could care less. They just want what they want.
Right, right.
But the vast majority of people who are practicing narcissists are traumatized to the point that if they admit culpability, if they become accountable, their internal structure collapses, because to admit any wrongdoing is to immediately go to a place of they don't deserve to live. So it's almost impossible to get somebody who has narcissistic personality disorder and gaslights to admit the truth. And if you think that it's an offense against you, you're usually going to be really invested in proving them wrong and bringing them evidence, and it's not going to make any difference.
Right, right.
You are up against an impossible task, and that's why arguing with a narcissist is pointless. But again, if this is a parent or a spouse or even a child, being able to have some compassion for how dysfunctional they are.
Right.
That this is actually first and foremost something that they're doing for themselves, not to you.
Right, right.
Okay. And that's important to know. How do you tell the difference? Always be looking for the objective. What is accomplished?
Right.
So in the case of my father, when he dissociated, he said, I don't know what you're talking about. That never happened. And he really meant it. And it was just like night and day between the two people. But if I have a partner who's gaslighting me, they're hanging on for dear life with their version of who they are. And you are nowhere in the script. And that's really important to notice. You just don't exist.
Right.
There's no like, oh, I'm so sorry that you felt that way or that you experienced that, or what can I do better next time that would not give you that kind of a sensation? It's just totally, I never said that. I would never say that. That's not who I am. You're absolutely positively crazy. You're wrong. You're imagining things. You're hypersensitive. You're hysterical. You.
Right, right.
I don't know how well I answered that question, because sometimes I actually have to help my clients in real time. They bring a particular interaction with me, and then I am particularly gifted in telling they know, they don't know.
No,
And
that was
you've got to be on the lookout for people who just, they know they're lying
yes.
and they really like lying. That's their way of life. So that's a different type of gaslighting. It's not
Right.
coming from narcissistic personality disorder so much as it's coming from a person who is completely in it for themselves. And okay, so there are like 6 different types of narcissistic personality disorder. We got a
Wow.
rabbit hole
Wow.
here
I
that we can
was like,
go
where did
down.
the 6?
So,
The one? Okay,
so,
now there's
so each
6.
type of narcissism shows up in a different way,
Yeah.
and the gaslighting has a different flavor to it. I'm going to stop talking
Wow.
now.
Oh no. I was like, you know what? When you said like, is this, did I answer it? That was beautifully and eloquently put. And it almost like had me in this
Mm.
trance because I've never heard it and worded with every word being intentional. And actually stepping in that other person's shoes that have encountered this. What does that look like?
Yeah.
What is that other person saying? What are they doing? What is their process? And why is it they believe so much into this reality that they're in, and why they're also struggling within it within themselves? Because I know that at times, like when any we as women, I'm going to say women because those are who are we're tuning into, that can feel like, oh,
Yeah.
why is this happening to me? Like, why is, am I doing this wrong? And da 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 da. And you said it has nothing to do with you. You don't exist. You do not
Yeah.
exist to this person. So if we could step
Yeah.
into this reality,
Yes.
it makes it that much easier to understand. I'm not saying that you're not going to
Yeah.
struggle or be hurt or feel that pain when it happens. But when
No.
you had mentioned it in this very, very
Yeah.
broad, but also specific way, it was easy to digest of what we're looking at here. So thank you
Oh.
for that. So
Yeah, I'm glad that was helpful. I really
yeah.
am.
And so this had me thinking, like, while we're talking, or while you were talking about uh gaslighting and narcissists, uh why why is gaslighting such an important topic for any woman wanting to re-enter the dating world? And I know you said a lot of the key
Oh,
components, but could we shift it to where we're honing in
yes.
on the
Okay.
women that
So this
are
is,
like, oh, wow, I experienced that, but now I'm entering the dating world. So, oh my gosh.
yeah. So here's the thing. If you don't understand why you're drawn to a narcissist, then
Mm,
you're susceptible.
right, right.
And it's really important to know that a narcissist often uses love bombing.
Mm,
Now, again, I am internal family systems informed. So I don't look at people who do these things as bad.
right,
I
right,
look at them as having a really dominant personality, a sub personality. It's a protector and is doing bad things.
right, right.
So I bring a lot of compassion and I work with people who gaslight and lie
Right.
and do bad things. And then I work with people who are victimized by those bad things.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really important to understand what's in it for you. Why did you pull in
Mm,
the narcissist? And I could speak for myself that I have no part in having narcissistic parents. That is on them.
right. I was like, the no control.
But
No
once I
control.
leave, yeah, once I leave, what was it about the narcissistic personality that I found attractive? And part of it, of course, is trauma. It reminded me of my parents, and it feels familiar.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the love bombing is very seductive for almost anybody. So people who did not
Mm,
have narcissistic parents, who haven't had the trauma that I've had, are likely to be pulled into that. And we need to acknowledge a gender difference here. Anybody of any gender can gaslight and be a narcissist, but in general, there are a lot more men engaging in the gaslighting behavior, whether they're narcissistic or not. And here is why. When you look at the historical fact of dating, it is based upon the woman usually being honest, chaste, devoted, loyal.
right.
And it's based
Yes.
on the man being a good provider, a fierce protector, and whatever else he does is none of your damn business. Um, so we have that in our past, And then we don't take the time to figure out what are our values now.
Right.
Instead, we kind of get seduced into this romantic play that's been going on for generations,
Yep.
where he sweeps her off her feet by wooing her, and he better compliment her and
Right.
kind of cater to her. And then for him, when they finally get committed to each other in whatever way they do, he's earned the right for her to be a good partner in whatever terms he thought a good partner was.
Right.
And unfortunately, we are just at a place in male and female development and evolution where a lot of men, not all men, just a lot of men, are kind of experiencing an arrested development.
Mm.
They are not as likely to be taking the self-improvement classes.
Mm-hmm.
They're not as likely to go to a
Right.
doctor, let alone a therapist.
Right.
And the culture is oftentimes bolsters dishonesty. So it'd be kind of like, I hope you didn't tell her, man. Oh,
Yeah.
no, of
Right.
course not. She doesn't need to.
Right. 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 It's like it becomes a norm.
It becomes the norm. And it can kind of get passed down from father to son. Like, don't tell your mom.
Right.
Your mom doesn't need to know. And so there's kind of like this boys' club where there's one set of truths for the boys' club and another set of truths for when they're interacting with females, whether it's their mom or their girlfriend or their wife. Is that true for all people? No, of course not.
Right. Right.
It's true for the vast majority. We have not gotten to a point in the culture where men tell the truth as much as women do.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to report that, but it's just a fact.
I was just gonna say, I was like, I
And
think everyone's nodding their head. I'm like, yep. No, we're not
as
gonna
long
fight her
as
with this
it
one.
is, no, and as long as it's rewarded, you think about
Yeah.
this. This is why I wanted to be careful to say not all gaslighters are narcissists. Sometimes they're just males who have really followed what they were told was male.
Mm-hmm.
They've they are showing up for the training that they had, which was don't tell your mom, or she
Right.
doesn't need to know.
Right.
And so you kind of have to be revolutionary if you want to break free of that. And you can pick a different partner, one who isn't inculcated with that male role training. And you can also look for signs of narcissistic personality disorder. Most importantly, if you think you're being gaslit, you need to keep a record.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a pause and let you ask some questions, Stefanie, but I want to tell your viewers why keeping a record is so important.
And I was just, we were like reading my mind here. I was like, when you mentioned the signs or red flags there, and are there any red flags or signs that one would see if they are continuously being gaslit? And what does that even look like? Because I know we kind of covered a lot. So, like, okay, what am I looking out for? What does that look like? Is that a red flag, or am I just, being crazy here? Is that him doing that right now?
So here's one red flag. Am I crazy?
Yeah. Yes, that's fine.
If you're
Going
wondering
out
if
of my
you're
mind.
crazy, you're probably being gaslit,
Yes.
because that's one of the first symptoms. It's
Right.
like, I think I'm losing my mind. Um,
Right. Right.
that is the intended impact.
Right.
Um, Originally, it's based on a film, and the man was trying to drive his wife insane by lying to her repeatedly
Wow.
and hoping to make her feel
Right.
insane. Now, people who gaslight now are usually just trying to avoid the consequences of their actions
Mhm.
and trying to manipulate you into the place they want you in relationship with them, or trying to preserve their image of themselves. There's a lot of different motivations for it, but it's not necessarily to make you think you're crazy. Although a lot of gaslighters will tell you that you're crazy.
I was
Um, so
just
so it's
being
important
blunt.
to write it down.
Yeah.
As soon as you start to think, I must be losing my mind, or he keeps telling me that he never said that or did that, but I thought sure he did.
Yeah.
I thought we had this conversation. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, oh, wow, what's happening? The minute you start to feel that way, start writing everything down with dates and times. I cannot stress how crucial
Mm.
this is to reclaim your sense of self and your sanity. Write it down. You will start to see, oh, okay, that really did happen. And so now we've got questions like, does this person have dissociative amnesia? Are they a pathological liar? Do they have narcissistic personality disorder? But at least you know now you're centered in what is real. And that's
Right.
really important
Right.
because abusers gaslight all the time. It's one
Right.
of the ways that they abuse. They minimize what they're doing to you and gradually make you feel more and more crazy. And always, it's your fault. You're responsible for whatever they did. Red flags. I think most of us have heard this one. I never did that. If I did say it, then this is what I meant. And if I never did that, but if I did do it, you deserved it. See that?
Mm.
See how
Mhm.
that works?
Right. Right.
Is it,
Right.
did you do it or not? Did you say it or
Right.
not? Your first line of defense is no, I didn't. But if I did, it's your fault. Okay, that's abusive.
Yes.
And you need to be able to recognize the abuse. Um, I want to let your viewers know that it doesn't mean you have to leave the relationship. Now, I know we're talking about dating after divorce. And I would say if you start seeing these kind of things while you're dating, run. Um,
So like, do I want to deal with that? No.
yeah, but let's
I'm trying to figure out what these signs look like. It's
just
like,
like
am
good
I
luck.
crazy?
Yeah, get some help. I don't need you in my life. But if you're in a long-term committed relationship, or if it's a parent or if it's a child, I just want to make sure that we cover this point because some of your viewers might actually be IDing some of these
Right.
behaviors in people that they're
Right.
not dating. And I
Uh-huh.
just really want to say sometimes we don't want to leave those people. Sometimes we need to find ways to take care of ourselves and remain sane in the face of the insanity of the gaslighting or the narcissistic
Right.
abuse. So I just needed to say that.
Thank you. This is gold right here. All these hidden gems and the knowledge that you're bringing is blowing my mind. But yeah, I know the women that are tuning in would appreciate this information. But to also add on to this, what are the long term effects on individuals who are repeatedly subjected to gaslighting? And
Oh,
the reason why I'm asking is to kind of also look at this broad picture. And
yeah.
yes, we are talking about dating after divorce, but if you're consciously choosing, and we brought up the red flags or the signs and what
Yeah.
that might look like. But if you continue being into this relationship, what are those long term effects with those individuals?
Well, let's say that you are divorcing somebody who gaslit you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it had to have taken an effect on your
Yeah.
nervous system, your immune system, your sense of self, your self-esteem, your sense of reality. Um, literally, you may be feeling like you're crazy. You might be feeling like you can't trust your judgment. You might feel like your picker is broken. Um,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
there's you're going to have a sense of betrayal and abandonment, a lot of grief because a lot of times when we've been in a relationship where we've been gaslit and narcissistically abused over time, we keep holding out hope that somehow or another they will care enough to stop doing this to us. And because they never did stop, we start to think maybe we didn't deserve
Yeah.
to be treated better. So, my first suggestion would be you don't date for a while.
Yeah, right.
Instead, you get into therapy and you get help and you start looking at your patterns.
Right.
So, the first thing you got to do is identify the narcissistic abuse and the gaslighting. If you can't identify it, then you're going to continue to be abused by it. And I
Very
don't
true.
mean that they'll stop doing it once you identify it. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that you actually can stop allowing it to impact you in an abusive way once you get an awareness, because you can literally stand there and while the person's gaslighting, you can go, oh, yeah, yeah, I remember.
I know
I
this.
remember my therapist or the video I watched. This one's textbook
Yep.
classic. Do they all have a manual? Um, and you can do whatever you want, like, smile or go, uh-huh, I hear you, and walk away. But
Right.
inside, you're going to feel so much different because you're going to like, wow, that was desperate. Um,
Yes. I was like, your awareness is there. You look at it, you shifted that perspective. You're in that knowing.
yeah, yeah. And so now you feel good about yourself.
Yes.
Um, but if your focus is on trying to control, contain, or
Yeah.
otherwise enlighten the narcissist or the person who's gaslighting you, give that one up because they have to want to
Yep.
change. They have to want help, and some can be helped. But they have to actually want it.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and very few do.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. So the after you've identified the abuse, then you got to turn your focus back on you.
Mhm.
What made me susceptible? Was it a parent? Was it trauma? Was it a previous relationship?
Right.
Um, or just ignorance that I didn't understand what gaslighting looked like? What part of me bought into the script of being love bombed and thinking that that made me special? And not realizing that that would come with abuse later down the road because you get elevated, you're special, and then you get devalued. And that's important to know. You got to rebuild yourself.
Yes.
Really important. That's why the self help, the therapy, rejuvenating yourself, focusing on you.
Yeah.
If you don't feel complete and you don't feel good inside yourself unless somebody is feeding you love bombing, you're going to walk
Mhm.
right into another one.
Yes.
You got
I
to be the
love
person
this.
who loves you.
That leaves me with saying, I was like, I hope everyone is taking notes. And if you're not, I was like, I encourage you to rewatch this replay and catch what it is that you missed and kind of let it soak in. Because believe it or not, I was like, this is just so enlightening hearing all of this unfold for how you are saying this. But what I also wanted to know now when you're saying, okay, bring it in to yourself.
Right.
Know what those patterns are. Was it from your past? What does that look like? Why is this happening to actually not be amongst all of this scatteredness and unknowing and repeating the same patterns and attracting the same people? So it's got me curious. Like what we had talked about here.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I was like, I had it at the tip of my brain.
I knew that happened.
I was like getting so caught up into this, but uh, what are some tips? What are some tips that you have for becoming bulletproof in the face of gaslighting?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I was like,
So
okay, I had to circle
I
back. I had a
I
brain
think,
fart,
look,
ladies.
I am a huge fan of internal family systems. Okay. And I want to tell you why, because if the person who's gaslighting me, if I just pity them,
Mm,
um, or look down on them, I'm going to have other parts that want to feel compassion, which is not pity.
yeah.
And if all I'm thinking is that I don't want this and I'm disgusted, I'm going to have other parts that once cared about this person or loved them. And if I demonize people and I make them just one thing,
Yeah.
there's a way in which I probably do that to myself too.
Mm,
So you want to get away from the good guy and the bad guy,
mm,
the victim and the perpetrator script if you can. It really dominates our culture. But this is what I'm about, is realizing that people are comprised of parts. So nobody is just one thing. You're going to be, if you do this deep dive into narcissism and gaslighting, which I highly recommend, but
yeah.
you got
Yes.
you have to be a
You have to
discerning.
go into our own journey here.
There are
Yeah.
a lot of people who are not qualified out there who are dropping videos because they can get a lot of likes,
Mm,
and that is money for them, but they don't know what they're talking about. And what they want to do is tell you over and over again that they were wrong and you're right,
right,
because that
right,
feels good.
right, right.
And if you
Hmm.
keep feeding that part that wants to feel superior, you are headed to another dysfunctional relationship because
Yes.
it's not healing you. If you
Yes.
really want to be bulletproof, you have got to find that place where you've got compassion for the person who hurt you and compassion for yourself. And I think the best way to do that is to internal family systems, where you start realizing that the person who hurt you is comprised of parts too.
Yep.
And I can just use my father as an example of this. My father grew up in a home where there was child sexual assault.
Mm.
So for
Hmm.
him, he felt that the type of molesting he engaged in wasn't wrong because it wasn't the full on rape that was being committed in his childhood.
Right,
And
right,
I have compassion for his lack of education, his lack of exposure. He was born in 1939. There were no words like child sexual assault, and there's
right.
certainly no places to go to where you'd get help for it. And that doesn't excuse what he did. He deserved a prison term. But I don't ever wish that my father was killed, which a lot of people have. Oh, your father should have died. And no, no, he's a
Right,
person.
right,
He's a human
right.
being, and he was abused. So he did the best he could, and he split, and that's what he did. He split, and the one half was a perpetrator, and one half was completely oblivious to the perpetrations. That's what he did, and I can have compassion for that. And the last words I said to my dad were, "I love you."
Wow.
Those were the last words he said to me, and he
Wow.
cried. It was over the phone, and I really want to stress boundaries are so important.
Yes, yes.
My dad was a very dangerous gun toting person. I would not want to be in the same room with him ever
Yes.
again. But being on the phone with him was safe. And I
Mhm.
just, you have to have the boundary. If this person is abusing you, get away. And
Right,
there's
right.
resources, there's domestic violence shelters, there's attorneys, there's restraining orders. I've been through all of that stuff. And there's a time
Right,
and a place for all of it. And you need to know what risks there are if you are separating yourself from a violent or abusive situation. Know where you are on the scale to what are these person's patterns? How much might they elevate the abuse if you pull away?
right.
Um, in my case, I actually had to sneak out from my
Mm.
abuser because I don't think he would have let me leave. Know the terrain you're on and then go find out what part you got pulled in.
Yeah.
Since my father was such an abusive, dark person, of course, my first boyfriend that I got engaged to was too. And he wasn't nearly as bad as my dad. He didn't never molested any kids. So
Right, right.
that gave him points. Um,
Not as bad.
and
But
you have to keep raising your standards.
mhm.
And that means you have to be more accountable. So over time, I realized you don't get out of an abusive situation without also being somebody who has the ability to be abusive. That abuse might show up in you in a different way.
Mm.
Maybe you gaslit your kids and told them it wasn't so bad what daddy was doing.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe you told yourself that. How do you stop furthering that abuse? How do you start loving yourself? You come towards yourself with that love. You get to know all your parts, the parts that like the love bombing, the parts that want to fix the
Yeah.
narcissist, the parts that
Mm.
really like the gaslighting because it sounded good. Like I
Right.
really didn't want to
Right,
know my
right,
husband was
right,
cheating on me, right?
right, right. Very
Okay,
true,
honey,
very
I
true. Thank you
believe
for
you.
that point. Yes.
Yeah. So find all those parts, love them up. They were all trying to protect you.
Yes.
And then in IFS, we learn to manifest this self. And self is really so wise and so ancient. And
Yes.
it is compassionate and it is curious, but it's also confident and it has
Mm.
clarity and it can intuit what the other person is doing. It can intuit what you're doing and it can help you navigate a really beautiful path forward. So that's where
Oh,
the bulletproof part comes in, is this hard work of healing and finding yourself, because that part's been with you forever and
yes.
it's way smarter than any therapist or coach.
Yes. Wow. Thank you for making this topic a bit easier to understand and to shine light on this topic. And I know it can be confusing and it can be overwhelming and downright challenging if you're like, am I ever going to break free of this? Is
Yeah.
it always going to be like this for me? I'm
Yeah.
always going to keep on attracting those same partners. But you are a true testament that no, no, it's not. This doesn't have to be this way. So I
No.
love how you eloquently kind of package this topic up for us and kind of put a little pretty bow on it. I mean, I can just talk to you and I had so many, I still have questions, but I was like, I love like, everything that you had mentioned, but wow. So before we head out, I know I wanted to cover a little bit more with you. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your free goodie with those that are
I
tuning in
I
today?
would love to. It's called the Exquisite Partnership Formula. So it has a lot of different components to it. It is a 10,000 word full color ebook. I spent a lot of money and time putting this thing together, and it's yours
Wow.
for free.
Wow.
Um, and so, first and foremost, because my background is as a domestic violence counselor and survivor, um, it teaches the perfect timeout. And you don't need to be in a domestic violence situation for this timeout to really, really help. Most couples think, oh, I'm going to take a timeout, and they have no clue how to do it. And they do it in ways that erode trust. So the next time you say to your partner, I'm taking a timeout, they probably aren't going to honor it. They're probably like, F you too.
Yeah.
And, or just keep talking, follow you around the house while you're trying to get away. So, which by the way is a form of violence, but most people don't know that. So,
Wow.
I think raising your voice, following somebody, blocking them when they're trying to leave a room, slamming doors, it's all a precursor to violence. And I say this as somebody who has had the hell beaten out of her. Um, I want people to understand that it's always a slippery slope.
Right.
So,
Right.
really important to know how to do timeouts, even if you're not in a situation where there's gaslighting. And gaslighting is a form of abuse. So, you just need to also know that there could, at some point, with somebody who gaslights, could at some point be forms of violence that show up. The other is a really fun game. It's a couples game, and it's called Show Me Your Movie. And my current partner and I invented this, and I love it. It's so much fun. You know, when you go to the movies, usually you suspend your own reality.
Yeah.
And you're just like there with the popcorn. Oh my God, that's so scary.
Very true.
Okay. Most of us have a really hard time listening to our partner tell us that when you did this or that, I felt like my whole world was ending or I was really scared. And we're like, well, I didn't do anything that scary. So in Show Me Your Movie, we suspend all of that. And each person takes a turn sharing what a particular moment was like for them. And the other person is there like, okay, tell me more. Oh my God, that sounds terrible. And so you're just like really showing up with your empathy.
Right.
And then you let them know what you heard and give them an opportunity to edit, add more to it if they don't feel completely heard. The whole idea is to feel heard. Then you switch roles. And then it's your turn to share your movie. What my partner and I often have found is that the two movies together make a really great film.
Yeah.
And we have way better understanding of ourselves, of each other, because I want to tell you, most of us are really focused on what the other guy did and we kind of forget what we did. So it's really helpful. You just get much more insight and you get to grow as a couple. There's also the actual exquisite partnership formula. It's a 5-step process for a very firm no. This is when you absolutely, positively just want to set a boundary. No, I'm not available for that. Period. But you don't want the person to disconnect from you. And I developed it for lovemaking. So that because I got so frustrated, so many of my female identified clients were enduring sex and touch that they really didn't like because they didn't want to hurt his feelings. And and I'm like, no, don't do that. You're starting to numb your body out. No wonder you don't have sexual response, but you've got to make sure all touch is welcome and all touch is what you want. And the only way you can do that is if you've got a boundary.
Right.
But how do you do that if you don't want to hurt his feelings or her feelings or their feelings? And you want the sex to continue.
Right.
5-step process in the exquisite partnership formula. We'll show you exactly how to do that. It is road tested. I developed this one
Like
when
this is
I was a sex worker. So
this is absolutely, I was just like, this is too good to be true. These are so, yours keep on delivering, Veronica.
well, I don't give you anything that hasn't been road tested in harsh
I love that word.
conditions.
But like, it's good. It works. And I was like, no, that sounds actually really amazing, huh? The movie thing. I was like, I can totally see that. But go ahead and click that link down below and pick that goodie up. It's the Exquisite Partnership Formula ebook.
Yeah.
And Veronica, what is a key takeaway that you would want the audience to remember from our discussion? And is there any last piece of advice or actionable step that you would like the listeners to leave with today?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I was like, that's kind of broad there.
Key takeaway. All your relationship drama begins and ends with you. That's a hard truth, but it is the fact. Whether you are being gaslit or in an abusive situation, the story begins and ends with you. When I was in a domestic violence situation, it began and ended with me. What is it about me that is showing up for this? What can I change about me that will get me out of this?
Right.
And then how do I change things inside me so that I never wind up in this situation again?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
That's
No, that
that's the
was the
key takeaway.
perfect key takeaway.
That's the
It
key
begins
takeaway.
and
And
ends.
the other
Yes.
question, what was the second question?
Oh, if there was any last piece of advice or an actionable step that you would
Well,
like.
since this was about gaslighting, is study up on the 6 different types of narcissistic personality disorder. Document when you
Mm.
think or feel that you're getting gaslit. Remember that if you feel like you're crazy, you are definitely getting gaslit.
Yeah, I was a perfect
And, that's not
example.
people don't walk around thinking that just out of the blue.
Yes.
It's a result of gaslit, and the gaslighting can take place by an employer, a friend, a parent, a child, a politician,
Yeah.
um, a priest, just a rabbi. Just remember, lots of people can gaslight, and if you can learn to spot it and not be susceptible to it, how do you don't be susceptible to it?
Yeah.
Recognize it, document it, and then just detach. You're not going to change it. You're not going to help this person to stop. Develop a sense of humor. How
Yes.
funny. How
Yeah.
funny is this
I was just gonna say
gaslighting?
we just went over that. You're like, huh? Okay.
Okay. Fascinating.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights and expert advice with us today. It was a pleasure having you, and what a fascinating and amazing, great conversation that we had. And for
I
those,
really enjoyed it.
yes, and for those that are listening in, make sure you grab that free goodie, the exquisite partnership formula ebook, and all those you would definitely want to have this like in your toolbox, if you will. And also be sure to tune back in for the rest of our Dating After Divorce for Women interview series. Thank you for joining us today. Bye.
Thank you, Stefanie. Thank you, all the viewers. Glad to be here.